What's going on, everybody? Jeremy Langlois here at Houmas House Estate and Gardens. Again, another beautiful day out here outside, so we're going to do some cooking. Before we start, I just want to go back. We did our first video last Thursday, and it's just been absolutely overwhelming. The response that we got from it, totally unexpected. The comments and the shares and the likes and all that stuff was just really incredible to have, so it makes us really excited to continue doing some of these cooking segments. Also, as we cook our recipes, always know that our recipes are online. This recipe that I'm doing shortly will go online in about 20 minutes, but it's on our, if you ever go to houmashouse.com, click the resource tab, and there's a whole section full of recipes, or you can subscribe to our newsletter as well, where we have monthly recipes coming from some of our secrets we do here at Houmas House. So with all that said, let's stop wasting time. Like I tell my staff, let's start wasting time and let's get cooking. We're doing just, again, just one of my favorite, just down home, dirty, comforting foods that I just love, but we're gonna try to make it a little more interesting as well. So we're gonna do a braised beef short rib. We're gonna serve it with grits, but I'm gonna make these grits, I've come up with this name, so take that for what you will, but it's called jambalaya grits. And we'll get to the jambalaya grits in a second. But first, let's start with cooking this short rib. So what I have here is, this is just a really beautiful cut of meat. This is a boneless beef short rib. You can follow the same recipe. Short ribs typically come, if you get them at your grocery store or your market, they'll either have bones on or bones off. Either way is fine. I prefer the bones off because the meat's just a little bit easier to work with. But having the bone, you can actually get a lot of flavor from those bones as well. So either way is absolutely fine to use. And what I've done first is, just before I even season the meat, all I did was throw a couple strips of bacon into this black iron pot and just started to crisp it up. But really, instead of putting olive oil or some type of cooking oil into this pan, you can see I got a lot of great smoke here. We're going to start with bacon grease or bacon fat from the bacon. Can't beat it. So what I like to do is, because this is going to be a braised meat. Now, what is braised? When you braise something, you're usually going to take a piece of meat and you're going to give it a dark caramelization on the outside. You're going to get a good, nice sear all over it, and then we're going to then cover the protein with a little bit of liquid and let it just cook for several hours till it gets real tender. So what I do is, as you can see, I'm using kosher salt and black pepper, and I'm really being generous with how much I'm putting on this short rib, because A, it's a thick piece of meat, so I'm trying to really penetrate it and get a lot of good seasoning in it, but also it's going to be in a liquid, so some of that seasoning is going to wash off. Once I have it seasoned, I'm going to go right into this pan and I'm going to start to sear it. Now, as that's cooking, I do want to talk about going back to the seasoning. I use kosher salt or sea salt typically when cooking, and ground black pepper or just or black pepper right out of a pepper meal. And those are my favorite ingredients to use. You know, I talked about this last week as well. Just, it's amazing how much better you can get the quality of your product just by having it seasoned well with salt and pepper. And honestly, that's just a skill developed over time. As you cook, just constantly be tasting everything you're cooking and start to adjust. I know some people, they get real scared with salt and they just put a little in and they don't season too much, or they're not tasting. And if you do that, your dish could, let's say you're making a soup, it could actually come out bland if you don't have a nice good seasoning on it. You don't want to over season, but you also don't want to under season as well. So the reason I like this kosher salt as opposed to table salt or iodized salt is because I like to put my salt in a container and I can really feel the grains in between my fingers, and it gives me just another layer of control of how much seasoning I'm using. Whereas if you've ever tried to season something like with a shaker and just that table salt, you don't really have a good feeling of how much salt you're actually putting in the dish, so it makes it a little more complicated. So just a quick simple tip as far as seasoning goes. Now, as this meat starts to sear, we're looking to get, just like this, we're looking to get a nice caramelization all over the outside of the meat. And what happens is, when I say caramelization, a nice, beautiful golden brown crust on the outside. And what that's going to do is help develop a layer of depth and flavor into the dish, and also have a nice texture on the outside as well. And you also actually get these little bits of caramelization on the bottom of this cast iron pot, that whenever we deglaze the pan, we're going to lift up all these concentrated flavors. So all these little bits of technique are really is what's going to help give the flavor to the dish. Now, as it starts to brown off, we're going to real simple go in with some vegetables. I got some celery, some carrots, and some onions and garlic. And what I like to do is, I'm not looking to cook them in too much, but I do like to get a little cook on the outside of them, just kind of stir them around. And what that's going to do is, by adding those items into it, this mirepoix, as they say in France, what that does is actually, because onions and all these vegetables have water in it, that's actually going to start lifting up some of that caramelization on the bottom of the pan as well. Then we're going to come in now with our liquids. Got some red wine and some beef stock. Now, if you don't have beef stock, you can use water, but that's like the last choice. Your first option is you want to use some kind of beef stock or beef broth. Even at grocery stores, they sell those cartons of beef broth, and that is absolutely fantastic for this. So you know, water the last chance, but you can just go ahead and anything that can just add a little bit of flavor, we want to put it in here. And then I have them eat just barely covered with our liquid, and I'm still leaving it on high, and I want that to come up to a simmer. Before we top it with our lid, I do want to put a couple of, or I say a couple, nice generous helping of just some sprigs of thyme or whatever hearty herbs that you have. You wouldn't want to put a delicate herb like basil in here right now, because that would just die and deteriorate. But rosemary, thyme, sage, these hearty herbs, they're going to cook fantastically in here, because this is going to simmer for about 3 hours. I even like to come back, and because I use some of that bacon to start off, I'm going to throw the bacon right in, because duh, is bacon. Comment in the comments below, name one thing that adding bacon to makes something taste worse. Spoiler alert, nothing. Bacon goes with everything, even desserts. So now that we have this starting to come to a simmer, I'm going to put a lid on this. And now there's a couple of options of how we can go about cooking this. We can just leave it on a low flame and let it kind of bubble away, and check on it from time to time to make sure it's not boiling too hard. You just want a slow simmer. If it's boiling too hard, because the meat's actually going to get tender, the boiling liquid could actually break up your short rib, and you don't want that. So you can leave it on the stove for about 3 or 4 hours, checking it, and if it starts to get low, you add a little bit of stock or a little bit of water just to bring that level up. But what I like to do at this point is, because we're cooking in cast iron, we can go right into the oven with this. So I set an oven to 350 degrees with the lid on. I would then pick this up and I would place it in the oven, and you can leave it for about 4 hours. We're going to come back to this later, but you can just pretty much forget about it. It's just going to slowly start to braise in that oven, and you don't have to do much work with it. It's protected in this vessel, and it's just good to go. So while this is cooking, let's go on to our grits. Got a little saucepan here. I'm going to add some olive oil to it. Now, I came up with this term jambalaya grits, and the reason I came up with that is grits, when I was growing up, grits was one of those things. Grits was one of these dishes. Look, this is a great example. If all of a sudden your pan's too hot, just take it off. No reason to stress. I throw a couple items in here that's going to pull that pan off. But growing up, Jeremy, was not a big grits fan. I hate to say this because I know my mom is going to watch this video at some point, but the grits that I ate growing up were terrible. Sorry, Mom. And it's not your fault. It's because they usually come in some kind of white grits in a cylinder packaging, and the instructions said boil them in water, and you were lucky to get a pat of butter and some salt and pepper in your grits, and that was it. And that was just never appealing to me. What really made me find a love for grits is just, again, going back to the fundamentals, using really nice quality ingredients. So what I got here is, this is some yellow stone ground grits. And this is just dry yellow corn. It gets grind, and you can find them at supermarkets and at the farmer's market. And it takes a little bit longer to cook, just like my cousin Vinny. It's not instant, it takes a little bit longer. But the quality of the grits and the flavor is just night and day. So if you haven't tried stone ground grits, yellow or white, definitely look into that. But I came up with this term jambalaya grits, just as a play on like a pastalaya. I love grits so much that I don't want to just boil them in water and add a little butter, salt, and pepper. I love treating grits as if the Italians treat risotto, where they really cook it down, add lots of onions and garlic, different flavors. You can add instead of using water, we're going to use milk today, but sometimes you can use chicken stock. All these things, I really try to elevate my grits. And I'm always looking to interject some Louisiana flavors into everything we do. So I got the idea of what if we started off cooking jambalaya. So I have some andouille sausage that I started cooking, but instead of adding rice, when we get to that point, we're gonna flip the script and we're gonna add grits, and that's gonna be our jambalaya grits. So I have the andouille sausage and it's starting to brown away. It's got a nice color on the outside. So now I'm gonna come in with our trinity again, onions, celery, bell pepper. I'm gonna come in with some garlic in a second, but what I like to do is whenever I'm throwing in my trinity and I have a really hot pan, I like to cook down my onion, celery, and bell pepper first, and then I add my garlic just a few moments after that, because if the pan itself is too hot, the garlic can burn faster than this. So I like to wait a second before I throw my garlic, just to make sure I don't, if I throw it right into that hot grease that was on the bottom of the pan, it could potentially burn my garlic, and we don't want that. So I'm just gonna let this kind of sweat down where it starts to cook and get a little bit translucent. And we are going to add milk. Now, when we're working with grits, the ratio you always want to use, just like when you're cooking rice. When you cook rice, you want to have 1 part rice to 2 parts water. Well, with grits, it's 1 part grits to 4, or actually I got it. Yeah, 1 part grits to 4 parts liquid. So you want 4 times the amount of liquid as the grits we're using. So just to make it real simple, if you're cooking 1 cup of raw grits, you would want to add 4 cups of liquid to it. So the liquid we're using today is milk. So we already have this measured out. So we're going to kind of add that in. Let that kind of come up to a simmer. And then we're going to put these yellow stone ground grits right into our pot and just kind of start to whisk these in. And what's really great about this is the flavor is just absolutely unique, and just the texture, it's got a more coarse texture than, say, the grits that you would typically find at a grocery store. And the flavor is just absolutely unmistakable. And it really makes just a nice, smooth tasting grits that you can't find by using the instant grits. Now what we want to do is let this start to come into a simmer, but even as it starts to come into a simmer, I like to go ahead, start adding a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper, and let that start to come up to a boil. Now, because these grits are a little more coarse and a little more fine, it's going to take a little bit longer to cook. We're not going to cook them all the way here, but we are going to get them started. But these would probably take about 30 minutes for them to you want to just come, and you don't have to baby it, but once my liquid comes up to a boil, I turn it down to a low heat where I just get a simmer, and you just want to give it a stir every now and then. Now let's come back to talking about our short rib. We check this, it's starting to simmer, and that's looking great. If it's cooking in the oven, we would have this in the oven. Now, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna swap these out because I have a short rib already cooked over here. So set this over to the side. And this is what it would look like after it comes out of the oven. I'm gonna take it out to let you see, but all those beautiful vegetables and all those carrots and garlic, they've all cooked down, and you've got a really nice stock that is cooked in. And what happens is all that flavor from the short rib itself starts to steep into the sauce. So it really, and then all that wine, all that's going to make a great sauce. So what we're eventually going to want to do is strain this sauce and then just cook it down. And as you cook it down, it's going to get a little thicker. But what I want to show you is this meat is absolutely tender, and it's what we want. You want to be able to stick a fork in it and kind of be able to twist it. But I just want to show y'all, sometimes it can actually even be a little bit tricky to get it out of the liquid because it does get so tender. But look, this is a spoon, and I can take it and I can push the spoon right through it. So just look how tender that is. Now, what we want to do is, if this was a dish that you were preparing for, let's say, a group of people, this is actually something that you could do ahead of time. It's what we do at the restaurant. We obviously, because this cooks for about 3 hours, we can't cook it to order. So what we do is we cook it in batches where we braise off a bunch of short ribs ahead of time. We actually will allow them to cool. If you're doing it, say, the day before, you can let this short rib cool in its juice overnight, or let it come down to room temperature. And as it cools, it gets a little bit more easier to work with and a little bit more solid, and I can actually take it and then cut it into different portions. Then once we get to that point, we don't want to waste all this is gold here. All this sauce is what we're looking for. So we would never throw this out. We would take it, any strainer you have is good. Anything you have at home, you can actually leave some of these vegetables in it. That would be absolutely fine. The carrots and the garlic are some of my favorite things to pick on and eat after we cook it. But normally what we would then do is take this, strain it, and then we would reduce it down to a thick sauce. So now we're gonna come back to our grits. They're starting to thicken up a little bit. And like I said, these would need to cook a little bit longer, but we have, I mean, just think of these grits. They have this andouille sausage, onion, celery, bell pepper. Now we're gonna kind of go more to the grit side just to keep elevating them a little bit more. We're gonna put some little baby tomatoes, some green onions, and then you can't have grits here without a little bit of good just cheddar cheese, or any cheese that you want would be great in them. And then we're just gonna start to mix all this together. And now I think we are working with something. So yeah, so this would cook for about 30 minutes total. Taste it every 10 minutes or so, just until the grits don't taste coarse, and that'll be ready to go. But I think we're ready to plate this bad boy. So how we serve it at the restaurant is, we actually, like I said, we pre-portion our short ribs. And then if you want, so to follow back, if you wanted to heat this up, if you cook it ahead of time and you want to heat it up the next day, one thing you could actually do is you could have it here and wrap this with plastic wrap. You could actually microwave this for about a minute or two just to warm it up, because you're just looking to warm it up. Or you can save a little bit of liquid, put it in a pot with a lid, and just turn it on and let it steep up and come up slowly. So it's something you could prep ahead of time and have done. And that's what we've done here. So we're going to take some of these jambalaya grits. We're going to go onto the plate. Our beef short rib goes right on top. This is our sauce made from the reduction of the juices that we had. And we're going to top it off with some roasted vegetables and some herbs out of our garden. And I tell you what, y'all, you know, and this is, we did beef short rib today, but you could do this with a chuck roast or an eye around, any type of meat that's tough. Anything that could cook for a long while. You wouldn't want to use a tenderloin or a ribeye, but you would want to use something like this, and it's going to come out just great. Here's some thyme and some flowers out of the garden. And there it is, y'all. Braised beef short rib with jambalaya grits. Let me know what y'all think. Let me know if y'all try it. If y'all got any questions, feel free to ask, and keep cooking, y'all. We're having such a blast out here over at Houmas House. Y'all take care out there.